I grew up in Medford, Oregon. I enrolled in farrier school and I was shoeing horses, or learning how to shoe horses. When my brother called, he was going to be flying an airplane up to Medford and he wanted me to come down and meet him for the weekend. I drove my brother and his friend back to the Medford airport where they had their Navy T2, and I watched them take off out of the Medford airport, and they kind of, did a little swoop and housing out of there. And I think it was that night I called my brother and I said, hey, how hard is it to be a pilot like you in the military? And then you go through that process of applying, taking the tests, until we were both told that, yeah, we could go to what was then called AOCS, which was Aviation Officer Candidate School in Pensacola, Florida. It's a mixture of boot camp, academics, physical training, a long process with Marine Corps drill instructors. Started in what was called the T-34 Charlie, which is a tandem seat turboprop airplane. At the completion of that program, there were 3 pipelines in the Navy, and one was helicopters, one was maritime, which consisted of P-3s, C-130s, and then the 3rd pipeline was jets. It just happened to be that the Navy needed some more jet pilots, and our scores were adequate, and our desires third in line were to go fly jets. So to start training in what was called the T2. The instructors are with you for the majority of the flights, and you soloed in each phase, more or less, and they take you from, the first flight in the airplane to flying formation, flying instruments. Then after you were deemed ready by the LSOs, we all went solo to the aircraft carrier for the first time. And we'd circle overhead the boat until they called us down. If they were satisfactory, the LSOs would tell you you're a qual and they'd send you home. The next phase after the T2 was the TA4, which was the advanced jet trainer. The program was fairly similar to the T2, and then they also had the air-to-air phase, which was air combat, more or less, jet against jet. At the end of that phase, you had to go back to the boat in the A4. The big day was being designated what we call the naval aviator and getting the wings of gold, which we all, I think, would prize that over anything. It's hard to describe the amount of studying that went into the process because you were always afraid of failures. The Navy kept me in Kingsville to instruct in the A4 for a year and a half. It turned out to be one of the best things that had ever happened to me because I got to spend another year and a half in Kingsville, and we flew a lot. So I did that for a year and a half, and at the completion, the one thing I knew is that I wanted to fly single-seat airplanes. And the Navy only had 2, and it was A7s or the F-18. I was lucky enough to get A7 orders out of my SERGRAD tour as an instructor. It's a whole nother syllabus that the A7, you have to go through the same deal, but now you're starting to fly a weapons platform, delivered bombs from all different, altitude, 200 feet off the ground, going as fast as we could make that little airplane go. Then you'd pop on a target and roll inverted and acquire the target and release your ordnance. I got orders to what ultimately became my fleet squadron, which was at that time called VA-27, and finished what was the rest of their cruise, the last 2.5 months of their cruise. So that more or less ended my A7. We all went back to Lemoore. We slowly started going and transitioning our personnel to the F-18. Several months of all the fundamental stuff in the F-18, and this time included more air-to-air training, fighter training. My entire naval career, I never saw an ounce of combat. We called it dropping your letter. It was a resignation letter, more or less. Got out of active duty Navy, allowed me then at that point to get back involved with the Naval Reserve on a part-time basis and keep flying the F-18. I was with my reserve squadron in Klamath Falls fighting the F-16s. I got a phone call. She said, hey, Mike, we want to know if you're interested in coming to work for UPS. And I was like, yes. Of course I do. And there I spent 29 years, and I just wound it up last week. Finished my last flight with UPS.